Good morning, everyone. I'm Michael Romine, and this is the Houston Grass Podcast. We are a day before Christmas Eve here, and you wouldn't know it. It's probably high 60s out there, and I think we're supposed to be in the mid 70s for highs for the foreseeable future. I don't think there's any 60-degree highs in the 10-day forecast right now. We've got a little rain in the forecast, and I'm looking out here at all the trees, and they're losing their leaves, a lot of them, but I think everything's probably a little bit confused, as it can be in Texas this time of year, or at least along the Gulf Coast. The weather it's a roller coaster ride, but we're going to be staring at 2025 here in a week or so. Not many folks discussing grass this time of year, but the few of you that might be, we'd like to keep this thing going month to month so we can tell you what the trends are and tell you what you should or shouldn't be doing this time of year, and mainly what you should be looking for. We'll definitely talk a little bit about, obviously we're not going to be talking about fertilizer or anything like that, but maybe watering is probably the biggest thing, and soil moisture and whatnot. So we'll touch on some of that, and I guess a little bit too on the weed control. This is the time of year, with the weather being so confused right now, you can get a little bit of everything. I have noticed I've got some spots around the office anyway, not so much at my house, that we've had a couple of frosts, and the weeds that are real susceptible to that cold, they've curled up and they're shriveling up and going away. So those frosts do help clean things up. We always talk about, when people ask about some of the summer weeds and the fall stuff that comes up, a lot of times we encourage people, hey, just wait it out and wait for winter to get here, and Mother Nature will usually take care of a lot of that stuff with a couple of frosts, and even if we get a freeze too, that's all the better for killing weeds. A lot of them anyway, not all of them. There are winter weeds, the poana and stuff like that show up in the winter. And let's move on to the temperature. It is late December now. We figure we've got probably January and February. I would suspect they're probably the two coldest months of the year in the Houston area here along the Gulf Coast. So we never know what we're going to get. Is it going to be one of those years we get one of those multi-day freezes? Those don't happen very often, but will we get at least a couple of hard freezes where we get dipped down in the high 20s or something like that, at least for the night or several hours? Or will it be just one of those warmer winters altogether? That kind of doesn't matter to the grass. The grass is certainly going dormant right now. We're having enough cool nights that, although it's a little bit confused and you might see some greening up, that's just part of the process this time of year. You certainly should not be doing anything to green your grass up right now. Really, the only thing you should be doing is mowing probably every other week. It is definitely slowed enough to where you don't need to be mowing every week. If you do, that it's not going to hurt anything. But mainly all you're really doing is, if you've got a few weeds out there, you're mowing those off just so they're not unsightly. So mowing a little bit, but you need to be keeping an eye on the soil moisture. Like I said, the old screwdriver test, if you can easily stick a long screwdriver in the ground and pull it out and it's got a little mud on it, the moisture is fine, and what we're getting from Mother Nature is okay. I can tell you that my irrigation systems at the office and at my house have both been off for probably a month now. A little bit of drought stress this late in the fall, going into, I think it's actually officially winter now, but it's not really going to hurt anything. In the growing part of the year, spring, summer, early fall, the grass needs 1 inch of water per week to thrive. Now we have definitely transferred over to the time that it's 1 inch of water every 2 weeks that you need. The screwdriver test just kind of confirms that for you. If you stick that same screwdriver in the ground and it comes out clean, or it's hard to get in the ground, you need to water. What's falling out of the sky is not enough, and you need to kick that irrigation system on and let it run a cycle. The timing is the same. Mornings are real good. You don't want to water too early in the mornings, because then that grass sits there wet and you can kind of promote brown patch, which we are still certainly seeing some of, but you don't want to wait till too late in the morning when the wind kicks up and the sun's out and you lose a lot to evaporation. 5-6 o'clock in the morning is when mine starts. It runs maybe 2 or 3 hours before it's done by the time it goes through all the zones. So I think that's a pretty good time to do that, but don't just totally forget about your landscaping in your yard this time of year. You definitely want to maintain that moisture. If we do get a hard freeze, I know you read all the time about how it's a good idea to water your plants deeply before a big freeze so that the moisture in the dirt holding that heat and protecting those roots from the cold. Grass is the exact same way. You do the infrequent but deep waterings just like you do the plants. If you're going to water, only be watering twice a week. If it just totally stopped raining, we were getting no rain, I would turn my irrigation system on manually every other week and I would let it run. I would do 2 cycles probably, so 2 days a week, never more than that. You need to be putting out a half inch of water at a time and only doing that twice, not a bunch of infrequent little watering. So normally the way this works is we're getting either plenty of help from Mother Nature. The winter rains are giving us, with the fronts that are coming through, are giving us enough moisture altogether, or at least to supplement it. So for the most part, irrigation systems just get turned off this time of year. Don't stress it out and let it get too overly dry. Just a thing that you got to think about. I know, nice to be able to turn that one thing off the checklist in your brain this time of year, but do keep an eye on the landscaping and the grass this time of year. It's not near as big of a deal as it is in the spring and summer, but do keep that in mind. Again, the browning off of the grass is normal. If we get a freeze, it obviously turns everything off solid brown. What happens a lot here is we don't get but maybe 1 or 2 real freezes, and we just get some frosts and stuff. That will be enough to turn off the grass almost 100% brown, but you may have a few weeds here and there that don't turn off, but it's just part of the process. Let it do its thing, and we'll talk again more in the spring here, and I guess in February is when we'll be really start talking about making spring preparations and everything. It is a time, one thing that will be coming up in late January or February is we'll be due another dose of the Barricade pre-emergent from Nitrophos. That's one of the 4 times a year that you put out the Barricade, and that will help prevent the weeds from germinating and coming up in the ones that want to try to come up in the spring. This will block them from coming up in the springtime. So that will be something we'll be talking about next episode in January, but we're definitely not doing anything. As a matter of fact, at chemicals go, there is not a thing you should be putting out on your yard right now unless you've just got a real big outbreak of brown patch, and in that case I would put out some Heritage G. It's a granular fungicide that you put out to either prevent and or treat brown patch. So that would be the only thing that I would be thinking about putting out on my yard right now. We talked about mowing a little bit earlier. One thing that mowing does bring to the table is leaf removal. A lot of times we talked about the leaves falling. I know I've got them. I can look out the window and I'm watching them shower down out here. You don't want to let the layer of leaves get too thick on your yard. A few leaves out there is not going to hurt a thing, but I would say probably weekly. I know I got 2 giant bags of leaves last week when I blew them all up in a pile, and I suspect that's probably the way it'll be for the next month, except for 1 week in there, and then the trees go crazy and we get probably 4 or 5 bags of leaves. So it is that time of year. You don't want to leave a ton of that out there. Mulching them up and leaving some leaves out there is not going to hurt a thing, but if it's a real thick layer of leaves, you need to try to get a lot of that out of there. You don't want to leave that sitting on top of the grass. So be vigilant about the weather changes and make sure you're doing those deep waterings. If we're not getting a lot of help, just anticipating that hard freeze could happen. I watch the news and the 10-day forecast, and there is no talk of that at all right now. It does look, I think we've got anywhere from 30 to 50% chance of rain coming up over the next week. So again, irrigation at my house and office are going to be off, because even if we get a 1/4 inch or so, a couple of 1/4 inch rains a week is more than ample to keep things going, and it'll be just fine. One task, I guess, that you could do to make sure you're ready for springtime, if you've just got some time on a rainy day and want to get something taken care of, is making sure your mower blades are sharp. Not ripping that grass is a lot better for that grass. You get a better look, and it's also less susceptible to funguses and stuff like that. If you've got a good sharp blade that makes a smooth cut across the top of there, you don't get those little frayed brown edges on the top, and it's just all around aesthetic and for the health of the grass. So either new blade, or if you're into those kind of projects, a side grinder or whatever that can sharpen that lawnmower blade and have you ready for springtime. It's a time to consider, okay, I've got weak areas in my yard, or I've got too much shade in some areas, and it's a good time to start planning for maybe early spring projects. We get really busy around here, and it's not that we can't supply you with the grass, but if you're wanting installation work, I know all these landscaper guys that come buy grass from us, and our guy that we contract to do a lot of our installation work, they get really busy by late February, early March. And so January, February, any time in the winter is a fine time to plant grass in Houston and in this part of the world. I can't think of a case. I think this is the end of our 20th year that we just finished, and I can't think of a time that someone bought grass from us in January and the grass died because it got so cold. It just doesn't happen here. So the grass could be dormant. It might be partially dormant, might be all the way dormant, but basically you're just laying the grass out there. It's going to stay in the squares, so you're going to have the seams until it warms up and starts growing and grows together. As long as you can keep the heavy foot traffic off of it, you're basically buying a root system. You're not buying pretty green grass, but you're covering that dirt up. You're keeping the weeds from germinating. You're keeping your soil in place, and even brown grass is better than dirt to look at, I suppose. So it is just fine time to do that. The day you lay it, you still do the big heavy watering, the 2-inch watering. You really get it good and soupy, because no matter what time of year you're doing it, you really have to get that grass good and stuck to the ground and get those air pockets out. So it is a good time to do that. I would not hesitate at all if I had to do that right now. Be thinking about those projects. If there are trees that need to be trimmed up to get ready for grass because you've got too much shade or something like that, take advantage of the time when these landscapers are slow and they're all looking for work, because a lot of them are not as busy because people are just not thinking about their yard. Now is a great time to take on projects like those. Get those trees trimmed up, plant grass if need be, and at least be planning for it in late winter, early spring, so you can be the first to it. So keep that in mind. I'm going to do something a little bit different here now. I'm going to answer a few questions that we've gotten here. I suppose that if these are relevant to somebody, maybe somebody else is thinking this along these lines as well. The first one: how often should I water my St. Augustine in January if we don't get any rain? Well, I guess I kind of touched on that already. You got to get an inch of water every other week, and I know people don't like to hear that sometimes. Well, how long does that mean I need to run my sprinklers and stuff? If I did not have an irrigation system, what I would do is if it was not raining at all, I would put my sprinkler out there and run it for probably 3 or 4 hours in each spot around the yard. The only way you're going to be able to tell that for sure is to stick a rain gauge out there, or the old tuna can trick, or whatever, to make sure you're getting that inch of water. However, I always have to throw this out that I can't think of many winters at all where we're not getting at least some water coming from the sky, and you have to keep that in mind. Weigh that in on how much you're watering. You're probably more apt to overwater in the winter than underwater. We go a long time without water. Stick that sprinkler out there, run it a few hours, and make sure each piece of the yard, including your beds and stuff, get a little bit of rain, get a little water on them. So if I have an irrigation system, you should be able to do that again, like we talked about, in 2 waterings, 2 half-inch waterings. And what that means is, I know I say this a lot, and it's all irrigation, the little heads that screw on the end of especially the ones that pop up and stay stationary. There's all kind of different gallons per minute heads that screw on there. So the only way to tell, again, I know I jump up and down on this, is to put a rain gauge out there. But I can tell you that what I do with my stuff is that the heads that just pop up and stay stationary, I run those about 12 to 15 minutes, and the rotor heads, the ones that pop up and are covering a large area, they move back and forth. forth slowly, those are 25 to 30 minutes. And I do that again twice a week. When the grass is growing, that's what happens. Again, you're not having to do near that much this time of year, but that's how mine is set, and that's how I always do it, in half-inch increments, because that's just what we preach, and I think it works well, those deep, infrequent waterings. Another question, is it too late to apply a pre-emergent if I see some weeds already growing? It's going to depend on what kind of weeds they are. As pre-emergent goes, yes, there is. If you haven't already, you were supposed to, fertilizing was supposed to happen in October, first half of November, and the pre-emergent, I believe, goes out around about that time as well. The next dose is not till late January, early February. So there are some weeds, like I said, there's a lot of weeds out there that are going to die if we just get a few frosts. It'll take care of those, and that's the best thing to do. If you've just got a few spotty weeds here and there, after a big rain or a big watering, go out there and pull them up. A lot of those weeds are pretty shallow rooted, and especially the ones that have the single taproot. A lot of times, especially after a big rain, if you don't wait till a rain comes, a lot of times what you do is you break the root off when you go to pull that up. But when the soil's soft, it tends to let go of those roots a lot easier. So that's what I would do as weed control goes for the next couple of months for sure. Let's see. Another one is, my neighbor says I should scalp my lawn in the winter. Is that a good idea? I would definitely not scalp it right now. I keep that mowing height up a little bit right now as this grass is going dormant. If we do get a big freeze, that will help protect those those runners and those roots and everything. Now is not the time to scalp a yard. The only time that I like to do that, no matter what kind of grass you have, is in the spring. Once the grass gets to going, there's going to be a lot of thatch, which is just the grass clippings and dead grass that fall down over time. And some grasses are more susceptible, particularly the zoysias, to getting that thicker layer. So you want to try to get as much of that out of there in the springtime. And scalping a yard can be really stressful to the grass. Certainly you would never ever want to do that during the hot part of the year, because you could do some real damage. You may even kill it because you stress it with the heat. You stress it a lot anyway, then you throw the heat in there and you could really do some damage. So you would not want to do that. But early in the springtime, I like to scalp off my yard and get as much of that dead material out of there as you possibly can. Get that layer of dead grass that's gone dormant, get as much of that out of there as you can. And that's a time that you definitely bag, rake. You want to get all that out of there. That's not a time to mulch the grass. That would be the only time I would think about that. So no scalping right now. Early in the spring is a great idea to do that and get as much of that dead material out of there as you can. So that is kind of all I have right now. We are here. I guess we do take the week off. We won't be available between Christmas and New Year's. We are back right after New Year's and ready to answer any questions or supply any grass that you might need. We'll put our website up here, but Houston Turfgrass is our website, and our phone number is 281-431 7441, and we're here pretty much at the intersection of south of Houston Highway 6 and FM 521, just east of Missouri City here on Highway 6. So if you've got any questions, please give us a call. Everyone have a great holiday and a happy new year. Hopefully it's a start of another great one for everyone. Thank you for listening.